1876 was a watershed year for this relatively new country, America. However, she hit 100 years old in 76, so she wasn't exactly new anymore, but she still survived. Many things were happening back then, some things of direct interest to everybody yet today. You had the pounding of the Golden Spike into the railroad there at Promontory Point in Utah. Yes, sirree. And you had this big battle with the Indians out there in Montana, battle with the Little Bighorn, which resulted in the demise of General Brevet George Armstrong Custer, one of the nation's Civil War heroes at the time. Then we had the Civil War itself. A lot of things were changing. It's a pivotal point. And I've often thought as I read through many of these history books of the era, they always deal with all the big events, not too much about how a normal person lived, like you and me. And I often think that what would it have been like day to day, everyday life, back there in 1876? Oh, I wouldn't be out there probably fighting the Indians. Most of us weren't. I wouldn't be back there at the big centennial World's Fair going on in Philadelphia either, on account of, unless you lived pretty close there, you didn't get around much in those days. You pretty much stuck to your own knitting back home and wherever you were from, old Arkansas or Nebraska. It had just become a state back here in 1867, I believe. We were brand new. We hadn't been around very much. Oh, we'd been a territory before that, but not too many people, unless they were adventurers or folks who were out there looking for gold, and wanted a hell of a lot to do with the uncivilized New West that was being uncovered out there. With all those savages trying to get you in. I mean, it was just not a very pleasant place to be. However, I ran across this little book over in Council Bluffs. I bought it on November 17th, 1991 at Cow Patty's over by Council Bluffs, Iowa. I don't know if Cow Patty's is still there or not. The title of the book is The Way It Was, 1876. The Way It Was. The little gal named Suzanne Hilton wrote this book, published it in 1975, just a year before our bicentennial. I suppose it was a pretty popular book then. It's been used pretty well. I've thumbed through her a lot. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. It's an amazing book because it talks about what happens, what was like with the real people back then. I don't think it even mentions Georgie Custer or President Grant or some of the recollections. She talks about the big things that happened, but that's not what we're going to talk about here today. We dwelled on that enough on and off, so I'm just going to put some excerpts of this little book. What I like to do is just open it wide open and find something that I can read for a little while and think about and maybe expound upon, which is, I guess, what I'm kind of doing now. Like here's a picture of the kindergarten class at the Centennial Exhibition. It showed parents that the little children could be taught without damaging their brains. Well, that was pretty cool, I would say. Yeah, who would have believed it? Who would have thunk it? You could teach little kids without damaging their brains. I guess you could say that was the start of a propaganda mill. And here, another page. We got these gals doing a little washing with the washing machine. It says, the newest 1876 improvement to the washing machine was the wringer. Yeah, the plunger and a tub of water were all the pioneer women needed to get clean clothes. But then when they got one of these washboards, like, see if we can get that in focus here. Yeah, right there. I mean, they were cooking with gas or cow pies, I guess, whatever you'd say. I find this to be a very, very interesting book, and I'm playing around with it all the time. It amazes me, usually when I thumb through her, I discover something brand new that I didn't know before, which is probably isn't that amazing. So I'm going to put a few excerpts in there on my page here from time to time as I open it up and find something to comment on. Okay, that's what it's all about. That's it for now. I got to go out and round up the cows. Well, I opened the book here at page 120. Just opened her up, and there we were. And I spotted this little ditty that may be of interest to some. It says here, most girls and women did not carry handbags. Instead, a girl had a pocket hidden among the folds of her dress to hold a reticule, sometimes called a ridicule. One teenage girl dropped her reticule on a street in Nebraska, probably Lincoln or Omaha, I imagine. Just had kind of wheel tracks, wheel ruts out in the rest of Nebraska, I would think. But it was found by a man who took it to the local newspaper office to advertise for its owner. Since there was no name inside, the paper listed the contents instead. So this is what this young lady was carrying around in her reticule. 2 white cotton handkerchiefs with hems bigger than the balance. Candy fish. 1 short slate pencil, black and chewed at the end, but too hard at the other. 1 bit of blue ribbon. 2 bits in money, that'd be 25 cents for you youngsters. 1 piece of short black scalloped ribbon. 1 elastic garter without a buckle. 2 short pieces of barber pole candy, 1 peppermint and 1 lemon. A pair of small black kid gloves. 1 parasol tassel. Camel's hairbrush. 1 love letter, parentheses, very tender, praising her and running down another girl, close parentheses. 1 horsehair ring, unfinished. 3 hairpins, 1 perfume bottle stopper, 1 box of breath perfume, a ball of floss, a broken crochet needle, a small piece of raw cotton, full of white powder. The left heel of a number 2 gaiter. Now you have to look that one up on the internet. I did. A gaiter was a thing that kind of goes around your neck and covers you up, maybe for like a sandstorm or something like that. I didn't know that. I just found that out today. 1 stocking with a hole in it in the toe, a thimble, and a nutcracker. You always want, a girl back in those days didn't want to be caught dead without a nutcracker, that's for damn sure. The pocket is of yellow nanking, which is a yellowish cotton kind of cloth, originally from China, but then they started making them over here in the U.S. by just taking regular cotton and dyeing it yellow. 1 pocket is of yellow nanking and can be obtained on application at this office. Yep, that's what a well-dressed girl would have worn around, would have had with her in her probably backpack-sized ridicule at the time. How about that? Continuing on in the same vein, we have this picture of 3 young ladies dressed in swimming suits in 1876. The caption below says, although new bathing dresses for young people were quite revealing, exposing ankles, arms, and throats, swimming in them was next to impossible. Here's the picture they're referring to. Right here. Yep, believe it or not, those are bathing suits. Right there. And they're very revealing bathing suits at that. I don't know what the world's coming to, Grandma Kristen would have said. I'll read a few paragraphs to let you in on what it was kind of like back in 1876. A rebellion of women actually might have begun at the seashore. Nowhere else was the inequality of men and women so very evident. A boy wore a two-piece bathing suit with his arms and legs bare. The sun could shine on his neck and face. He could even swim if he had to. A girl didn't have a chance. She wore a long dress that hung well below her knees. Under that she wore long pants down to her ankles or else thick stockings. Very young girls could wear short sleeves, but a young lady over 12 covered her arms. She did so to keep them from tanning. Her dress was fastened right up to her throat, or men might look at her. She wore a hat with a wide brim, and it was tied on securely to shade her face, and there was absolutely nothing exposed. But rebellion was only a few thousand miles away. Word came back from the west that women on the Pacific coast refused to wear the traditional striped stockings for bathing. They were, get this, they were wearing flesh-colored ones instead. 1,000 miles in the other direction, some French women, oh boy, they'd been seen bathing in the Mediterranean with no stockings on at all. Hubba, hubba, ding, ding. Baby, you got everything. And the newspapers of the New Jersey shore resorts notified its readers that any woman as bold as those would be arrested on the spot. It's your sweet bippy, baby. Miss Amelia Bloom thought women should wear a sensible national costume. The one she suggested had a short jacket and short skirt worn over long pants, which came to be known as, you guessed it, bloomers. They looked a little like the Turkish costumes at the Centennial. The idea was a little too strange for most women and very much too strange for men's liking. Really interesting. Yep, that's the way it was. 1876. This one on page 126 tickled the hell out of me. It's talking about women's suffrage. And I thought this was kind of cute, so let's see what you think. The most important battle that ladies fought that year, however, was against the laws of the country. Suffragists were trying to do much more than just get the vote for women. Susan B. Anthony said, "Women want bread, not the ballot." Already, there were some states where women could vote. The liberation leaders felt that if women could vote in all states, why then they might have a better chance to get some laws passed that could help them. The ladies expected the men to oppose them, and they were not mistaken. Almost every man in the country seemed to be on the other side. Mark Twain said that if women voted, all the smart ones would vote like their smart husbands, and all the dumb ones would vote like their dumb husbands. Then the result would be exactly the same when the votes were counted, except that each candidate would receive just twice as many votes as before. Makes sense to me. What do you think, girls? That's 1876. Yes, sir, Bob. You know, we're always seeing these TV programs and movies about families in the Old West and how the women were hardy and stout and bore a lot of the responsibility along with the men, and they were equal partners in the marriages. And look at Shane. I mean, my goodness. Shane lived with a family that was just about as perfectly balanced as you could get, and Little House on the Prairie. Man, oh man, Michael Landon, look at Look at the way he treated his wife, and you would think that's the way it was. But let's see here what Suzanne has to say about that. All of the laws in 1876 were on the men's side. A woman had hardly any rights at all. Her father was her boss until she was married. Then at the wedding ceremony, he gave her away to her husband, who then took over. She really belonged to him. Everything she since owned was his now. He could spend her money as he pleased, and choose her friends for her, and separate her from her relatives, change her religion, and he had the right to beat the hell out of her if he wanted to. A mother didn't even have control of her own children. If her husband wanted his children to be raised by a family down the road, by golly, he could give them away. Children belonged to their father, as it should be. He could demand that they work for him and put them in jail if they did not obey him. I mean, he conceived them and he's raising them, paying for their clothes and everything. Why not? Many teenagers in 1876 were sent to reform schools, also to industrial farms, by their fathers to turn them into good children. The children, and that included all under 18, were given no trials because they had no rights either. Even a child who stole bread might be sent to an adult prison. Juvenile courts were more than 20 years in the future. Wasn't no such thing. 1876. Legally, a wife didn't exist without her husband. He could not give her any property except through a trustee. Only since 1872 had she been allowed to keep any money she earned herself after marriage, and only with the court's permission. And the court would not permit it if the husband objected. No husband left everything to his wife when he died. If there were children, she could have 1/3 of the property. If she had no children, she couldn't have more than half his property, even though the property might all have belonged to her family before she married him. How about that? A wife could do no business unless her husband joined her in signing the contracts. There was one exception, and this one makes sense. She was allowed to contract to buy a sewing machine and pay for it on time payments. How about that? This was the only way a poor widow could earn a living, sewing clothes and paying for a machine at the same time. A wife could not be a corporate member of any institution, even though she may have given it a great deal of money. The only exception to this rule was an institution run by women for the care of children or for the sick and indigent. Lily Jordan discovered the power of the law when she danced with a gentleman at the Centennial Tea Party in February 1876. Lily had known Curtis for many years, but it was not until after she married another guy she realized Curtis was the man she really loved. Too bad, her husband and friends told her. You're married now. Forget about it. Lily only wanted to dance with Curtis, but her husband commanded her not to. So did her brother-in-law and her own father. The other guests at the dance must have enjoyed watching the commotion. Oh, lordy, lordy. Lily was high-spirited, perhaps something of a liberationist. She danced with Curtis anyway. The next day, Lily's baby, little Francis, was taken away to live with its grandparents. Taken away until Lily was brought to her senses. Lily went home to her father, furious. She tried once to kidnap her son, but failed, but the grandparents got suspicious. They kept the baby. Lily's husband told her that his wounded pride could only be soothed when she admitted that she'd done wrong and regretted her sinful act of dancing with Curtis. Well, within a year, Lily had gotten a divorce, one of the very few given that year. Then a great scandal to both families. She was married soon afterward to Curtis, but baby Francis belonged to his father, and Lily never held him again. Amen. True story, because Suzanne put it in her book.